talk to Clare Lopez, who's on with me, a guest on the show from time to time, Vice President of Research and Analysis at the Essential Center for Security Policy, Frank Gaffney's group. Good morning, Clare. Thanks for joining me.
Hello, Alex. Thank you. Glad to be with you.
I'm glad to have you back. And let's turn to Syria right now and Turkey. And I want to know your thoughts on what is the difference in our Syria policy now than before that's angered Erdogan so much, because he's fired up these days.
What seems to be developing is a plan from the senior leadership of the Trump administration, the Defense Department, to oppose the Iranian presence and expansion and establishment, especially of some kind of a land bridge from Iran to the Mediterranean, by backing and arming and supporting a Kurdish force in the region. That is what has Turkey upset, because, of course, Erdogan's number one objective is to diminish any ability of Kurds to form a unified force.
Okay, so should we be worried about Turkish retaliation on U.S. military assets in Syria? And realistically, can Turkey hurt us, or is this mostly just tough talk?
Well, it's a crowded battle space over there, and Turkish forces are present inside of that battle space. I don't think that they will eventually make good on the bluster that we're hearing from Erdogan right now. At least, hopefully, will not. But it's very much a concern in a place like that where you've got so many different forces conflicted in such a small space.
Okay, so now I want to talk about UN and Israel and Palestine. And Trump is going to withhold $65 million from UN's Palestinian Refugee Agency. I think there was a collective cheer in the Breitbart virtual newsroom when we got this news. But why withdraw money from this particular agency?
Well, for one thing, this agency, UNRWA, is the only agency of the United Nations or in the world that actually exists solely to support one purported refugee population, that is the Palestinians. The other thing about it is that in terms of numbers and in fact, actual refugees from the original set of refugees that were created or that came into being to be supported by this group, not include millions of descendants. They now include perhaps fewer than 100,000 people left living original actual refugees. So withdrawal of funding from this organization is long overdue, and especially in consideration of the kinds of things that the money goes for, which include support for schools, which, teach and train the young Palestinian students in jihad, Jew hatred, killing of Israelis. We've all seen the videos of their school plays and so forth. This is long overdue, withdrawing this funding from this organization.
Yeah, I'm all for it, but should we stop here? Or are there more organizations that are on your list? And are there any good organizations out there that maybe could use a few of our dollars?
Well, do you mean in direct support of Palestinian populations in Gaza?
I was thinking more in general, any sort of refugee group or anything connected to Israel or the Palestinians. Any of your thoughts, Clare?
Well, I mean, certainly there is reason to provide funding where funding will do good and actually help populations with security, with education. But when it's demonstrated, like with UNRWA, that the money goes directly to the training and teaching of young Palestinians to become shahid, to grow up and to kill Jews, that funding's got to be withdrawn and put in other places. Yes, support electricity, support utility services to people in Gaza, to the West Bank. Okay, fine. But not to UNRWA to teach kids to hate Jews.
So are there any allies that we have in this, in our efforts as a country to put out the truth, put out real information on what the UN does in this instance, or are we basically a voice in the wilderness?
This is a tough one. Europeans in particular are big donors to UNRWA, to the Palestinians in general, and don't support our withdrawal of funding from this organization. lots of others in the world are not aligned with us on this, and we do stand, thanks to President Trump, thanks to Ambassador Nikki Haley, in large measure alone on this. But it's worth it, and it's right. It's the right stand to take.
Okay, so the next topic I wanted to bring up with you is there's a story on our Breitbart Israel or Breitbart Jerusalem vertical, a report that Mossad intel leads to raids on Iranian spies in Germany. And I wanted to get your thoughts on this one. Where in the world are you most concerned about Iranian influence? Is there a lot of Iranian influence in the West, perhaps in Eastern Europe? What are you seeing?
The Iranian intelligence service, called the Ministry of Intelligence and Security, because it actually is a member of the cabinet in Iran, is a very advanced, sophisticated intelligence service. It does have representation all over the world, not just in Europe, in Germany, but also the Western Hemisphere. And this is perhaps where we might be most concerned for the United States in particular, is that wherever there are diplomatic representations of Tehran, that is, embassies and consulates, and also they will use business fronts, Islamic centers, and mosques. They will have MOIS, intelligence operatives, undercover. And part of the job of those operatives is to conduct liaison, in particular here in the Western Hemisphere, this is relevant, with Hezbollah operatives. And we saw this story most recently break out into the news with the recent Political article about Hezbollah operations in the Western Hemisphere, including narco-trafficking and other kinds of criminality. Well, those Hezbollah operatives are directed by Iranian intelligence officers undercover in their diplomatic missions, as I said, business cover, companies, and Islamic centers. So, yes, this is of concern. It is of concern all over the world. But we should be looking right here in our own backyard.
All right. So next question for you. And Clare Lopez is with me. She's from the Center for Security Policy. You can go to securefreedom.org. You can go to counterjihad.com. Frank Gaffney's group. Essential reading for anyone who wants to be informed about the world. So what can Israel do to combat Iranian influence? What can America do? What can we do? What can the good guys do?
Well, I think a lot of it goes on publicly, and a lot of it goes on, behind the scenes. And so certainly identifying, tracking down, identifying, and then maybe expelling, PNGing, that is, representatives of the Iranian intelligence service when they're found is one part of that. Uncovering, as journalists do, what Hezbollah and what Iranian operatives are doing, and publishing that, exposing that, that's another part of it. But just realizing and understanding that the Tehran regime, according to its own constitution, is a jihad regime dedicated to the spread of Islam worldwide. That's what they wrote in their own constitution. So we first have to understand what the regime is and expose that. And then, as I said, the fight against them goes on at many different levels. I, for one, and many of my colleagues at the Center for Security Policy are convinced that another part of this is to urge and encourage President Trump to get out of the Iranian nuclear deal, which is nothing but a sham. And it is high time that we not only refuse to recertify the deal, but also to reimpose sanctions that would actually get us out of the deal, because it's merely a front for a clandestine nuclear weapons program. That, too, is part of the intelligence mission of the Iranian intelligence service, which is the one that serves to hide it, conceal it, and pretend it doesn't exist.
It's Clare Lopez from the Center for Security Policy. Thanks, Clare. Really appreciate it. We'll have you back soon.
Thank you.